Welcome to this panel discussion on global information infrastructure and policy. There is a perception all around the world that information technology will be the dominant technology in the 21st century and probably centuries beyond that. For any technology to flourish and for any industry to grow, we need infrastructure as an important component. What is that infrastructure which is important for the information industry to grow and to evolve an information-centered economy in the coming centuries? And that infrastructure is termed the information infrastructure. The information infrastructure can exist at different levels, such as a national information infrastructure covering a nation, or a regional information infrastructure covering regions of the world, or a global information infrastructure covering the entire world. At the moment, we have the perception of the global information infrastructure evolving from national information infrastructure, regional information infrastructure, and leading on to the global information infrastructure. It is not enough that we have the infrastructure, we also need to have an associated policy with the industry as to how do we provide access to the people. Information collection, storage, processing, dissemination, and free distribution, all this assume importance. So we need to have fairly well-defined policies associated with this. So today in this panel discussion, we will be discussing both these topics of information infrastructure and the associated policy. For this purpose, we have three distinguished guests with us today in the studio. Professor Betty Turok from the Rutgers University, the United States, and Professor Satyanarayana from Indira Gandhi National Open University, and Dr. Rath from the Indira Gandhi National Open University. I would first request Professor Betty Turok to tell us about the concepts and basic elements of and also the guiding principles of information infrastructure nationally as well as globally. And before I request Professor Turok to do this, let me tell you a few words about her. Professor Turok is a librarian, library educator, and library advocate, and is the immediate past president of the American Library Association. As you probably know, the American Library Association is one of the largest library associations in the world, having over 68,000 members. Professor Turok has held many leadership positions and management posts across the United States. He is currently a professor in the School of Communication, Information, and Library Studies at the Rutgers University. Professor Turok is a recipient of many awards of this Jesse Shera Award of Outstanding Research in 1989, Distinguished Alumni Award for Rutgers University, and the 1994 New Jersey Library Leadership Award are the important ones. I request Professor Turok to tell our audience about the concept of information infrastructure, the guiding principles, and the elements that constitute the information infrastructure.
The global information infrastructure is a network of 45,000 integrated networks. It makes information created anywhere in the globe immediately accessible to others that may be a half world away, so that were I in India and I created information and wanted to disseminate it, I could do that to people in the United States as easily as to the people of India. The technologies that have made this possible are a convergence of the computer, television, and telecommunications. Where previously we had printed information only if I had the document or the book, or shared the document or the book with another person, would they have similar information to mine. But now that information is available electronically, I can share information through a series of technologies. First of all, by digitizing it, that is, putting it into the language of the computer. Secondly, I can add pictures and graphics and design to that information via the technology of television. And then I can send that information from one place all around the world via telecommunications technology, fiber optics. All of that is brought together in order to make very rapid, very available connections among information that is disseminated and that is used for living, for learning, for working, just in every possible venue of our lives. A number of questions arise when we think about the global information infrastructure, frequently called the GII for short, but more usually known by the name Information Superhighway to the people of the world. One of the major questions is who's going to reap the benefits? Up to this time, the concentration has been on the economics of the global information infrastructure. That is, how can we use this fiber optic cabling, this new medium of information transmission, to make more money, to make the economy grow, to provide new ways of providing stable economies for the nations of the world. Now we can also ask some questions about if it will reap benefits for the people. While we would all agree, I think, that increasing, enhancing the economy of all of our countries and all of our nations is a positive thing, the aspect of information that has been pretty much ignored to this point is how is it going to benefit the people of the world? There are a number of principles then that we look at when we talk about the information superhighway. The first one of which is universal service. Universal service makes electronic information available everywhere. It's going to be very difficult in our world to make information universally available because there are disparities in technology and the competence in technology around the world. Another principle important to electronic information and its dissemination is the principle of electronic intellectual freedom. It's very important in democracies like the United States and India, where we believe that people should have free access, open access to information. Intellectual freedom is something which we're always guarding, over which we must all be vigilant. And we see already in the information superhighway that there are many challenges to intellectual freedom. We have in the United States now a challenge which comes from some people wanting to call information either decent or indecent, and that has led to a court case. Another principle upon which the information superhighway needs to be built is that of copyright, or a balance between the information which is put forth by publishers and authors and fair use, that is, the information which can be used by the public. Privacy is a third principle. How do we allow privacy for the individual and the individual's information, at the same time allowing for surveillance when necessary for violent acts or for antisocial acts, and at the same time maintain a democratic environment of privacy for the individual? Another issue that is very important, obviously, is the issue of equity. While universal service makes information available everywhere, equity makes it available to everyone. And so we look at intellectual freedom, universal service, copyright protection, privacy. All of these issues combine in the issue of equity. And we ask the question, how can we make certain in this society that information is justly, fairly, and affordably shared among the people of the world?
Thank you, Professor Turo. I think that's been a very interesting introduction to the information infrastructure. You described the information infrastructure as a network of a very large number of networks, and talked about optical fiber being one of the major medium in which information will be carried all over. And you also mentioned about the information being multimedia in nature. And all this infrastructure and the utilization of this in the economy becomes meaningful when we have associated policies for accessing and distributing information. So a national information policy as well as a global information policy becomes an important aspect of the upcoming economy and industry in the new centuries. I request Professor Satyanarayana to tell us about the basic principles and the key parameters that are associated with the information policies. Firstly, the national level, the principle, and what you perceive that to be at the global level.
Yes, in the context of global information infrastructure, if any country has to participate effectively and reap the benefits of this global infrastructure, we need to have an organized policy. The policy should be basic for a country, and in any emerging economy or in any democratic setup like India, we should have an organized information policy which will contain all the key parameters, namely we must have the resource building aspect, the target audience to whom information has got to be equitably distributed. We must also have the infrastructural facilities such as is being mentioned, telecommunications, and telecommunications either by optical method or using fiber optics, but we should have a well structured telecommunication facility as one of the facilities. Then the resources that are available in our local setup have got to be organized and mechanisms have to be established for their free flow throughout the country, and also we must be participants in the global information infrastructure through an effective, efficiently formulated policy which contains telecommunication aspects, then information infrastructure resource aspects, then it contains the training aspects, so that certain skills are to be incorporated into the system through policy, so that our people are effectively involved in the dissemination process and in the collection and processing aspects of this information. So, they will be in a position to effectively participate at national level, and therefore, I feel in any system like in any democratic system, equity or free flow of information, the benefits of free flow of information could be had more effectively if we have a very well designed information policy.
Thank you, Professor Satyanarayana, for that nice introduction about the information policy. Much as the way we have policy for education, we talk about education for all, we talk about telecommunications policy. We need to have an information policy in the upcoming years, and that information policy could well be information for all. It can talk about equitable access, and it can talk about the education training that would be required to do this. And this takes us on to the next topic of how do we prepare ourselves for the new information centered economy that's likely to emerge in the coming century. That would call for reorientation in our education as far as the library and information science is concerned, a certain amount of retraining for the existing library and information professionals so that they could prepare themselves to meet the challenges that the new information centered society would pose. So, we have Dr. Rath here who is a faculty member from the IGNOU and has been teaching different courses and has a long experience in librarianship as well, to tell us about his perception of the changes that would be required in the library and information curriculum, as well as the retraining aspects that would be required for the existing library and information professional, and any problem that you might perceive with from the student's point of view as far as the new society is concerned.
Yeah, when we see the things from students' perspective, then we in a society called information society, or we can say network society, we need changes at 3 levels. One is in restructuring the existing library and information science curricula. If need be, then to have a specialized training programs for the existing library and information professionals, but more so the students of today, in particular in our profession, or if we talk about Indian context, they do not have much exposure to the computerization aspect, computer practice and skills that they need to cope with or to work in a computerized library environment. Therefore, at bachelor's level, at master's level, the restructuring the existing library and information science curricula to make it more technology based, giving much emphasis on developing the skills, especially the computer skills, so that they can adjust with the present day information society, a society which is very much governed by the information and communication technologies.
Thank you, Dr. Dutt, for that nice brief about the need to restructure our curriculum and also to prepare ourselves for the upcoming information society. I would like to address a question to Professor Turok to know how the United States is contributing to the implementation of the information infrastructure, and I would also like you to touch upon the information policy that the United States has at the moment and the would have in the foreseeable future. Professor Turok.
Our Vice President Al Gore has been a proponent of the national and global information infrastructures since the beginning of his time in office. He's made it very clear that he wants it to be a tool as much for the people as he does a tool for business. When we think about the global information infrastructure, we are talking about a series of policies which the federal government either has in place in the United States or is being very strongly debated in the Congress even as we meet. First of all, the policy for information in the United States, I think, is equally as distracted, moved around, fragmented as it sounds as though it is in India. We have that in common. There really is no national information infrastructure policy per se. There are pieces of it developing all over the national government. For example, the policy which is being debated now in the Congress is over copyright protection and fair use. That policy came from the Department of Commerce. As a result, when we look at the policy, we can see that it's very heavily oriented toward business. That's of great concern to information professionals and to librarians because we're concerned with information being freely available to all the people with the right remuneration going back to authors. We have had a series of copyright laws over the years which have allowed that to occur. The Congress is also debating the Telecommunications Act Communications Decency provision. Actually, that's been kicked all the way up to our Supreme Court, and decisions are being made now, within the month of March and April, about whether the indecency clause, which exists in the current legislation, will be continued. If it is, it means that information available to those 17 years old will be all that's freely available on the information superhighway. Another policy that has come about as a result of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 is the policy for universal service. It's been established in the United States by the Congress and then through the Federal Communications Commission, which regulates telecommunications, that all libraries, schools, and health service organizations will have access to the information superhighway, that they will have special discounts, and that they will have broad bandwidth technology made available to them. Broad bandwidth technology means that libraries, that schools, and that health service facilities will have the opportunity for that combination of multimedia that I described earlier, the digital encoding, the graphics, and also the fiber optic cabling. The policies of privacy are a part of the Telecommunications Act and the National Information Property Protection Act, both. That's another way in which policy is fragmented in the United States. The government has already supplied, through the Library Services and Technology Act, about $150 million a year, which goes to the technological transformation of libraries and also goes to services for people with special needs. In addition to that, because of the Telecommunications Act, about $2 billion a year will be made available to the same three groups, libraries, schools, and health service organizations, so that they can provide information for the rest of society. For the first time, these public service agencies are being looked upon as universal service providers and not recipients. These are very important things which are going on in the United States.
Thank you, Professor Turok. I think having heard you about what the United States is doing with regard to the information infrastructure as well as the policy, I would like my audience to now know about Dr. Satyanarayana, your perception of the status of information infrastructure as well as information policy in India.
Well, at the moment, so far as resource structure is concerned, we are fairly catching up. But when we see the infrastructure facility that is essential for effective and efficient participation by way of telecommunications and by computer software and hardware infrastructural facilities made available to the information community, I feel a lot has to be done. But insofar as training facilities are concerned, as Dr. Rath felt, there is a need for a sea change in the curriculum and also the skills that are going to be incorporated into the curriculum of the training programs, because we are diverging from the traditional aspects of librarianship into a particular information technology oriented syllabi, where the need is towards providing exposure, more exposure to the technology in a practical manner.
Dr. Rath, you talked about the technology component that needs to be brought into the curriculum, which Professor Satyanarayana is also strongly advocated. And what is your perception of the current status of technology induction into the library and information science curriculum in the country? We have about over 70 library schools in the country offering courses at the bachelor's level, and some offering courses at the master's level, and some even having PhD program in library and information science. How far these schools have reoriented themselves to get to induct technology into their curriculum?
To my mind, if there are maximum 75 library and information schools in India, hardly 10% of these 75, they have a curriculum which is technology based. Once we say that a curriculum should be more or less technology based, having certain amount of information and communication technologies, the students should be more exposed to the what the networking environment is. What is this database, a CD-ROM, more on this information communication, printing and publishing technologies, and the more emphasis should be given to the practice aspect so as to develop their skills rather than theory.
Okay, we are coming to the end of the program. I think I want to ask a quick question to Professor Turok. We talk about this information infrastructure, the global and national. Much more than this infrastructure, a very popular word that everybody knows is the internet. Now, would you like to say internet versus GII? How are they related? Is it one and the same or something else?
Well, actually, the internet is where it began. The internet was an academic network put up for mainly researchers and scholars to use and to communicate digitally. What's happened is that the information superhighway has grown up from the internet, and it has encompassed now all forms of information, not just those that are relevant to scholars. They're relevant to everyday people in their everyday lives. And so we see the Internet as being the precursor to what we know as the global information infrastructure, or the baseline for the global information infrastructure. What will happen is that, I believe what will happen is that the global information infrastructure will become multicultural, because cultures from all around the world will be contributing to it. The Internet was really developed originally in the academic environment in the United States.
Thank you, Professor Turok. I think we're coming to the end of the program, and it's been a very interesting and lively panel discussion on the sense of how the information technology will play a very major role in the upcoming economy and the new society, as well as the policies that we need along with that, and the different technologies that will go into supporting the information technology, like the telecom technology, optical fiber technology, satellite technology, and so on. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming over to the studio and telling our audience about this.